Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
Hello and welcome to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Daniel Irwin. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
And Dr. Daria Lorio-Barston. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone.
And we are so thankful to always be joined by our producer, Emily Muse. Hi, Emily.
Hello.
All right, so today I wanted to delve into something that just, I know the second I say it, it's gonna, something is gonna come to your mind. Our listeners are gonna have something that comes to their mind. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are. What are some of your biggest pet peeves?
I'll start with my first one. This is the first one that came to mind. It's probably not my biggest pet peeve. And I think a bunch of mine revolve around driving. It's when people don't stop at stop signs or stoplights and they make like a right on red in front of you and then they go under the speed limit. It makes me a little ragey. And
Like
I
they kind of
really,
cut you off, but they won't get up to
yeah,
the
you
speed
just
limit.
see them like roll through the stoplight and then they're like going 10 under the speed limit. And you're like, what? You could be back. You didn't have to involve the rest of us in your decision.
The contradiction
And
is too much, huh?
the
Like you were in a
contradiction. You're in
hurry,
such
you
a
couldn't
hurry, but
stop.
now you're not. Ooh,
I
that's
get it.
one.
All right, Daria.
Well, I'm just giggling at Daniel's driving ones. And I love the fact that he said one of them, like most of them are driving. So I really want to know, like, how in depth does that list get?
Oh, we all have them when it comes to driving.
Oh, no, 100%. No, I agree. Out of serious. Like, I mean, people who drive under the speed limit, especially if I'm in a hurry, definitely is a like very serious pet peeve. The one that just popped into my head, and perhaps this is because I'm a parent of a teenager, is when kids call their parents bro or bruh.
Oh, we have a rule
That's
about that in our house. Mm-mm.
that's exactly right. That was one that we just had to be like, no, 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 we're gonna get rid of that because I don't know why it bothers me. I feel like I'm turning into like an older lady who's getting ready to scream to people, get off my lawn type of situation. But I do feel like it's just not super duper respectful, right? And so being called bro or bruh, unless it's in a very sarcastic, purposeful manner.
Well, if it makes you feel better, when my kids were little, the whole yes, ma'am thing is really culturally a big thing here where we live. I didn't grow up where that was a culturally big thing. And so then my kids would say yes, ma'am, and then that would really irritate me. And I'm like, I'm not a ma'am, I'm your mom. You can say yes, mom, but please don't say yes, ma'am. So, I get it. I think it's like that agreed upon, like, what are we agreeing that you're going to call me? Because I will say, this wasn't what I was going to say for my pet peeve, but related, I don't like when people don't call me by the correct name. Like, it's a really big deal that I want to be called by my correct name.
Yeah, so Selena, it's funny because I do have to go on the record saying my own child did it once and that was it, right? But it is other kids when they are talking, if it's a mixed group of kids and adults and they are comfortable, which is a wonderful thing. But then because of that comfort, the bro or bra kind of gets thrown towards an adult perspective. Yeah, that's one that just makes me cringe a little on the inside.
All right, Emily, we can't leave you out of this conversation because everybody's got them.
Oh, I know I do. And the first one that came to mind was imagine a bucket of like Legos or small plastic things and the sound that it makes when that bucket tips over and all those pieces fall on like a linoleum floor. So I had to work to overcome this one working with kids and young people, right? Like that one had to get worked through. But yes, the sound of small plastic things hitting the floor in a big rush. Ugh.
Oh, and let's be honest, there's nothing worse than stepping on one of those small plastic items.
Oh yeah, and it sets the foundation for even more fun things to come because you can't step on the Legos until the Legos are on the floor. So it's not good.
Listen, this is going to be old news by the time this episode comes out, but we're going to have to put this in the show notes. There was a very brave mom who recently got the Guinness World Record for walking across the Legos the longest distance. This is a thing, y'all. I'm telling you, this is a thing. I'm gonna have to find an article. And I remember just being in complete awe and admiration of that woman because one Lego is one too many for me to step on.
Well, but of course she was a parent, right? Like I feel like if you have not lived that life, you would never even try this this
She accidentally has been training for years.
exactly.
One of my pet peeves is when people call the plural of Lego Legos because the plural of Lego is Lego.
If it, I will say I have
It's not really a pet peeve. It was just my
I
way of tying
appreciate
that into
that.
the conversation.
I appreciate you calling us all out on that, actually, as I was reflecting on the fact that I'm pretty sure we all just did that.
I apologize for nothing.
Well, let me tell you what, that does bring me to another pet peeve. And this is one of those hills that I will spend a very long time on.
Is it data and data?
It is. Datum is singular. Dear listener, please, please use appropriate grammar when you refer to data. Data are plural. So data indicate, not data indicates. Datum is singular, data a plural.
Could
Okay.
you please
Or
use
you could use
datum in a sentence, please, Daria?
Can you say this again, Daniel?
Could you please use the word datum in a sentence?
Yes. Datum indicates that people use this word incorrectly. Would you like for me to spell it as well? D-A-T-U-M.
How?
Datum.
I
I'm trying to
think
think of a singular.
I went and
I
took
need
a
an
point
example
of
of
datum
singular
or
datum.
datum. I went and took
Datum.
a point of datum. Like it's a singular point. It's kind of like the die dice thing, right? Like we
Hmm.
don't say I have
Yes.
one die typically, but that is the singular form
Yes.
of that word.
Yeah. It's usually, I mean, honestly, Daniel, it's
So it's a
not that people
datum
don't
point,
it's not that
like
hard.
the
You're
November 17th datum point.
You're fixating on the wrong part. It's the verbs. It's the verbs that have to align. So if you use data, which is generally correct use if you're referring to more than one point of something, right? Then the verb just has to match. But because we're so used to hearing data indicate, instead of data indicates or data insert singular noun, that's when the problem arises. Yo, I'm getting very worked up about this conversation already.
It's okay. I think the workaround for this one, or at least my workaround for this one, because I don't think I've ever written the word datum, but I will use data set. I have a data set that indicates, because that is one, it's more than
Yes,
one thing, but it's a singular unit.
yes, yes, that is reasonable. I think this is a sore point because I have been on many a project when we would go back and forth or a presentation and change the verb following data. And so, as someone for whom English is a second language, I don't there are many grammatical errors that I still make. The articles still get me. However, the grammar rules that I know that I know, and I will have a long discussion about why that
All
is.
right. So the most controversial grammar rule that I think really does serve as a pet peeve for a lot of people is the Oxford comma.
Kate, yes, Oxford comma is the only correct way to use a set of nouns. Oxford comma, yes,
I
absolutely.
don't know anybody that doesn't agree with that.
Oh, really? It's like a thing. I
I
just
don't
read an
think
article
I've run
today
across a
that
lot
the
of people.
title was it was like this, and this, and they didn't use the Oxford comma, and it can change the meaning if you don't use it correctly.
Oh yeah,
Daniel,
there's some
Daniel,
very inappropriate examples out there.
is is this true for your world because you have actively disowned all the people who don't
Oh,
believe
maybe
in
that's
Oxford
it.
comma?
It's such a
Or
pet peeve that you're like, I
maybe
can't
it's
talk to
big
you
grammar
anymore.
trying to divide us as a population where division lines don't actually exist.
I think he's trying to play the middle ground here. The
I'm
Oxford
not.
commas
I very much am in favor of the Oxford comma. I'm just saying maybe the people who don't, air
use
quotes,
air
the
quotes there.
people who don't use the Oxford comma don't actually exist. And it's just somebody trying to sell us the
No,
next
no,
iteration
they
of
do.
style formatting.
They
And
do. I met them. I met some, not all of them, but I met
Like as
some.
a collective group, they had a
met all
conference that
four of
was
them.
we are the
And they're just
non-Oxford comma
contrarians in every
using
aspect of life.
association.
They don't, yeah.
Please wear a tinfoil hat for the remainder of this episode.
All right, we are devolving, so I'm going to move us on, I think, a little bit. So, what does this have to do with what we're talking about today? Well, what we're actually talking about today is self-regulation, which is a really important set of skills. And so, as we move into this, as we are all trying to practice our self-regulation skills, talking about our pet peeves, what is self-regulation and why is it something that's important when we work with kids?
So I think it's really important because I think we're seeing patterns and trends, and data indicate that students who are really struggling with this and resulting in interfering behaviors is higher and higher. And what it is, self-regulation, it can be defined by a variety of ways. But one of my definitions that I really like because I think it captures the essence of this best comes from Murray et al. And they talked about how self-regulation skills are managing your thoughts and feelings in order to enable goal-directed actions. So to break that down, it's making sure that you're able to manage your thoughts, feelings as they arise, that you're able to manage your actions that are consistent with what it is that you set out to do. So instead of perseverating on a particular pet peeve of yours that you may have witnessed, you're able to recover and get back on track, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think we see lots of examples of, I think we can probably all come up with examples of people who have the inability, or at least at certain times, to self-regulate. I actually think driving is a really good example of this. When we see instances of road rage, that's not good self-regulation skills. And so if we think that this is important, which I do, I think being able to be an adult who can regulate our emotions, who can act appropriately in situations that may be more difficult, I think is a really good skill set to have. So then why don't kids do this better? And that sounds like a silly question, but I think that there are some really pointed things that as educators we need to think about. So why don't kids self-regulate better?
I think part of it is kind of developing the vocabulary and sort of the personal experiences around big feelings, for lack of a better word. And, maybe not having had models or instruction around observing our own behaviors and or internal states, right? So if my heart rate's up and I'm sweating and my fingers are losing feeling, that's an indicator to me that something's happening to me. And helping kids develop a vocabulary around that is kind of the first step in saying, okay, I'm feeling a way that is uncomfortable for me. I'm recognizing it, I'm naming it, and now I can start, part of the other instruction that comes there is what are the things I'm going to do to help fix this, right? Um, how am I going to manage this? What are my strategies for when I feel this way or when I'm in a situation that is uncomfortable, that is frustrating, when somebody pulls out in front of me and then goes under the speed limit? Like all these things create something internally a lot of times, and giving the language and giving sort of, yeah, name it to tame it, recognizing those things in ourselves, I think is a really challenging kind of thing, especially if we haven't sometimes gotten instruction and starting to name some of those internal ways of being.
States, private events.
Thank you. Good grief. Internal states.
Yeah, I think I think it's really important to also acknowledge, and you brought this up, as adults, we hopefully have self-regulation skills too. And we may not always identify them that way, but we have things that we do when we feel uncomfortable, or we have things that we do when we get upset or angry. And somewhere along the way, we learned, hopefully, ones that work and that are effective, but kids don't just magically have these. And so we do have to teach them. In our pre-conversation, Daniel, I do want to bring up, because I thought this was a really good point that you talked about, is I think a lot of classrooms have tools, have strategies, have areas that they have set up to help promote self-regulation, but I'm not sure that we always teach what to do in those situations. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit more.
I would love to. Um, and so I think it really is a wonderful thing that there's a recognition that students at some point are going to feel a sense of being overwhelmed or needing a break or um, some of those emotions that are not conducive to learning, right? And
But
may need,
are totally
but
developmentally
are
appropriate.
completely normal and developmentally appropriate and part of growing up and part of being a human being. Um, and we're seeing more and more in classrooms that there are areas kind of designated as break areas or regulation areas or zone, like whatever you want to call it. It's a place that's sort of set aside. There's some privacy there so that students ideally can use this space to get away from stressors, to have some time to themselves, engage in some of their self-regulation, calming strategies, quickly, efficiently, and then get back to the day's business, right? And so I think wonderful. We're seeing more of these places we're seeing the need for this kind of space being recognized in a lot of different classrooms. I think the challenge then becomes, okay, we've got this space, but how are we teaching kids to actually use it? If they had the self-regulation and self-management skills, then they would likely use them, but we have these spaces as a place, as kind of a visual reminder. It's a physical way to sort of get away. But we also have to talk about what the routine looks like, right? We have to talk to kids and we have to sort of model, if I'm feeling frustrated, anxious, overwhelmed, whatever, sort of the feeling is, this is what it feels like in my body. These are the thoughts I might be having. And it's normal, one, to feel this way, to have these feelings, and there's something I can do about it, and then rehearsing what it is, right? Helping kids sort of identify these are the things that work for me. Some kids need to sit and just be quiet. Some kids need to jump and shake their sillies out. Some kids need to sing a song to bring it back down, right? We all have our own ways of doing things, and so giving kids the opportunity to have a space to explore, to work with them, to build the vocabulary, to build the strategies, identify strategies, practice the strategies, um, will make those spaces meaningful. They'll make them usable. They'll make them efficient. And they'll help kids develop skills that they can then use perhaps in their desk, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't have to get up and go to the space anymore. I can use the skills I learned there when things were removed and I was in sort of a quiet spot. I can use those now to help myself regulate and get back to whatever's happening that day.
And to that point, I think sometimes we forget that developmentally kids don't have self regulation skills by themselves, right? They need to be taught, they need to experience co regulation from their adult first. Because and there is I know Emily will be gracious enough to link this in the show notes, but there is a great report from Rosanbalm and Murray that shows the developmental phases of how self-regulation is developed. And if you think about when babies are born and when they're learning how to self-soothe and they engage in crying behavior, right? We don't say, okay, we'll go to this breakout area and here's a menu of choices. You can blow bubbles, you can draw. Like, that is a very unreasonable expectation. You don't expect a baby to have those skills. But yet, when our kids get into schools, preschool, elementary schools, we make an assumption that they have some of those skills, where developmentally, that's not where they're at. We are kind of, as human beings, are shifting from that co-regulation when we are counting on caring adults in our lives to help us manage our emotions, to where we eventually end up making a shift towards engaging more in self regulation, where we are more in charge of managing our thoughts, feelings, private events, all those wonderful things, right? But it does not happen in a linear move. They're kind of peaks and valleys in a way, where some kids in preschool develop some of those skills really well. And then the next big jump isn't until adolescence. And that is assuming a neurotypical brain without additional external factors like collective trauma, or without ACEs, or without, any of those additional pieces. And so I think that we're really well intended adults who try to give spaces to the students to engage in that self regulation. But if the kids don't have the skills, if they haven't seen what that looks like, if they haven't experienced some of those strategies, if they don't know what to do, then just creating that space isn't going to actually help them self regulate. It's just going to give them a different space in the setting. And so
Hey,
I think,
Daria, real
yeah,
quick, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, can you say what ACEs are very quickly?
adverse childhood experiences.
Thank you. You threw out
Yeah.
that acronym, and I just want to make sure everyone's with us.
You're welcome. Yeah, and we can put that in the show notes as well. But I think the other part is different kids develop differently, right? And so I think it's important for us to be very mindful, whether you're teaching preschool or whether you're teaching high school, that while it would be lovely if all of our kids had strong self-regulation skills, sometimes they don't. And sometimes we need to help them bridge that by, again, modeling, by engaging in co-regulation strategies with the students until they get a successful repertoire of self-regulation behavior. So I just wanted to make that point as Daniel was talking about the spaces, like the calming corners in the classroom, which, by the way, I think are phenomenal supports for students, and I'm a firm believer into all of them, but they serve as a tool, not as an intervention by themselves.
Well, and I think the point about, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, we can't expect kids to just know what to do. They have to be taught. And so, as with anything, as with any new tool, any new strategy, teaching has to occur. I want to hone in, excuse me, on the co-regulation thing that you were talking about. And we were talking earlier, an example of this, and then I want you to talk a little more about it. But, I think everyone's had the experience where they've seen a little kid, 1.5 to 2.5 years old, running around and they fall. And instead of immediately reacting, the kid looks at the adults around them. And what they're looking for is, I'm not actually sure how I'm supposed to react in this moment. So I'm looking to the adults to see what I should do. And so when we see a parent, a caregiver, another adult who's like, oh, get up, let's keep going, and they just kind of bring it forward with them, that's a different reaction than, "Oh, are you okay? Are you bleeding? Are you hurting? Oh my goodness, like you might have broken bones." And I'm being a little exaggerative here, but we've seen both happen. And with the second one, kids are far more likely to all of a sudden go, I'm not okay. I should cry. And then we see the crying that occurs versus, oh, mom, dad, another adult in my life seems like this is not a big deal. Maybe I am okay and I can move forward. So, with that in mind, Daria, talk a little bit more about why that co-regulation, not just at those very young years, is important, but as kids get older as well.
Well, because that's how they learn, right? That's how they learn, and that's how they build their own set of strategies as to what to do in order to self-regulate. And those strategies are either going to be very helpful and very effective and appropriate for a variety of settings, or maybe not so much, right? There are lots of folks who enjoy in self-regulation strategies that are more harmful than helpful. But what that looks like in the classroom is, I think we all have seen when students have escalated to the point where they have gotten into their amygdalas, right? To where that stress response is so high, that they are losing their ability to process language, they're losing their ability to express language, and they really need to be able to de-escalate their emotions first before you can engage in any sort of problem solving. And so sometimes it is really something as simple as breathing together. And I know how it sounds, but realistically, when you're watching a kiddo, whether, and I say kiddo even if they're a high school student, but when you're watching kind of the kiddos begin to spin out and escalate, it may be something that you just come up and you say, hey, you know what? It looks to me like you're having a hard time managing a current situation. When I find myself in a situation like that, I like to take 5 long breaths, right? The one that I always jump to is the good old fashioned starfish breathing, is sometimes what we call it, where you trace your fingers on a palm of your hand and you do an inhale when you trace it on the way up. And then when you come down, you do an exhale. So you breathe in and breathe out while you're tracing your fingers. And as you're doing this, you say to the student, hey, when you're able to, join me when you can, right? And so it eventually what happens is, after a couple of like really shallow breaths, because you are there literally modeling this in a very supportive environment, then the student engages in that strategy as well. And that's what that co-regulation is. So you are demonstrating the strategy, they're engaging with you. And after a couple of long breaths, we know that that has a tendency to kind of de-escalate a lot of things. And so then as they get to a calmer place, then you're able, not at that moment, but at some point of time later on, to talk about, so, hey, what happened? What can we do in the future? If I think a breathing is not working for you, what can you do instead? But it's essentially just engaging in the behavior with the student and getting them to join you in that behavior so that they can effectively self-regulate when you are right there co-regulating it with them. So it starts with them looking to you to manage that regulation, and then eventually you remove yourself out of it, and they are able to do self-regulation.
And I think it's important to mention here, related, is when you have children or individuals who are engaging in crisis level behavior, your reactions, your own self-regulation is so critically important, because if you escalate your own behavior, their behavior is also going to continue to escalate. Versus just the simple act of you staying calm is actually doing a lot in that moment, even if you don't feel like you're doing a lot in that moment.
Yeah, and Selena, I think we also have to give grace to everyone, right? You just have
Of
to
course.
present calm. It's okay if you're secretly freaking out on the inside. That's fine. It's just about, what do your behaviors indicate?
Oh,
So,
this is a fake it till you make it kind of thing too,
I
for
mean,
sure.
but
100%.
truthfully, right?
And there's strategies for that too, right? So like one of my go-tos when there was escalated behavior slash dangerous behavior, interfering, whatever, um, because time gets weird when our when we're escalated, is really watching a clock and counting things out, right? I've worked with a lot of teachers who are like, you've got to watch the clock. The clock is the thing that will always stay the way it's going. Watch the second hand and use that to sort of help inform how you're responding. You're making sure kids are safe, but you're also really looking at something that's very predictable, objective. It is not changing based on what's changing in the environment. And so it's always sort of that way to sort of come back and say, okay, it feels like maybe we've been here for 2 hours, but it's been 8 minutes. Um, and being able to even count out 10 seconds at a time, 30 seconds at a time, um, while you're sort of engaging in, all the things you've got to do to keep kids safe and to help them de-escalate. But that, I think, is a strategy not only for good behavioral intervention, but also for self-regulation and self-management in what might be a crisis time.
And that takes practice. So to Daria, to your
Mhm.
point, what I was gonna say is, you staying calm, or at least your behaviors appearing calm, that takes practice too. Because I think when we see behavior that is unexpected, unpredictable, we aren't sure what to do, we aren't sure how to respond. Of course we get escalated. Of course, we have a response to that. And so it really does take some practice to be able to say, okay, let me take a step back. Let me take my own deep breaths. Let me get myself in check here so that I can be the support that's needed at this moment.
Yeah, and Selena, I think sometimes the other piece is that when we talk about self-regulation, most of the time we immediately jump to talking about the POT self-regulation skills, which is that managing the emotions and managing those feelings, right? But there is another side to self-regulation, and so I want to make sure that our listeners are also aware of that part, is the skills that are called cool self-regulation skills. And cool self regulation skills, even though I know it sounds like, oh, they're the cool ones, right? But it actually refers to not the ones that deal with emotions, but the ones that deal more with organizational behaviors. So, kind of executive functioning piece of being able to stick with an assignment when it has gotten boring or when you don't really care about it. That's the other piece of managing your own thoughts and feelings and behaviors, not when you are emotionally agitated, but when it requires some of those, again, the organizational skills of kind of stick to itness type of skills. And so it's the same thing. We still have to model it. We still have to show the students, this is a task analysis. Let's model some of the organizational skills. But it's really, I think it's important for folks to remember that both types of skills all fall under the umbrella of self-regulation, and kids do require additional instruction and additional support and some of that co-regulation with that. So I think there are many teachers we can think about who at the beginning of the year say, okay, let me show you how to set up your binder. Let me show you how to take notes, right? Let me show you how to make sure that you turn in your papers on time and they are not lost somewhere on the bottom of the bag in a very wrinkled state. So those are also the strategies of teaching self-regulation. You're just teaching more of that executive function piece than the emotional regulation.
Yeah, and I think one really good example of that as adults, I know how many times have you been sitting in a presentation or a conference or something, and your brain just is not focused on what you're supposed to be focusing on. And so you go stand in the back of the room. You're doing something that's very socially appropriate. You're not interrupting other people, but you are engaging in self-regulation so that you can attend to what you're supposed to be attending to. Unfortunately, a lot of times those behaviors that we engage in as adults, children are not always allowed to engage in. Like a kid can't always just get up and walk to the back of the room. But it is something to think about in your classroom of letting kids know, hey, if you need to do this, that's okay. Hey, this is not a time that it's okay to do this because I need you to be in whatever place you need to be.
Yeah, and I think the key to your point here is making sure that teachers, and I know this is a point that we have made many times on previous episodes before, is that we're not making assumptions that kids have the skills or know what these skills will look like contextually appropriate in the setting, right? And so it's about being clear with what is okay and what's not okay, and planning on actually providing that instruction and weaving that into already a full pack day with academic instruction, behavior instruction, all of those pieces. But it's looking for those natural opportunities to make sure that we actually providing explicit instruction on that, and not making assumptions that kids know how to do those things.
Exactly.
I think another kind of point there, Daria, is that we're modeling and being really specific about how we're modeling, right? Like teachers get frustrated, right? Sometimes we get my hands are above my head. We get it up, we're up to here, right? And so being able to sort of model that this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm doing about it, um, is a great way to show that this is not unique. This is something that everyone is kind of dealing with. And I think there's also sort of this opportunity to shift sort of that internal, that what can be kind of damaging or negative self-talk that kids may engage in when they are or after they've engaged in something that might be disruptive or something that was sort of outside of kind of what the expectations are. And so being able to sort of model that language. Is just one quick example. As I was in a preschool classroom, and I think the kid was probably 4, and was having a tough time transitioning from one center to the other. But the teacher was able to sort of help him calm down, and then gave him the language of "I can do hard things," right? And then he said, "I can do hard things," and then he went and he made, the hard decision to go to the kitchen center instead of the art center, and he did it. And he had that language, like he had that language was there with him to say, he was encouraging himself. Basically, he started to develop, hopefully maybe developing a pattern of self-affirmation, rather than maybe some of those more negative or spiraling kind of comments about yourself. So yeah.
Daniel, way to bring this full circle, right? We started this conversation with you talking about naming to tame it. And I think now we're kind of have made the full circle about, yes, name it to tame it as the first step, give that language, but then provide that explicit instruction and make your thinking visible so then kids can engage with that and in that. So then they can eventually internalize and be able to use those strategies without having to really explicitly think, okay, step 1, stop freaking out. Step 2, right? Like all of those pieces. So I think, Selena, I think this is a nice way to Daniel did a great job of bringing it full circle. I don't know that we need to say anything more.
I don't think we do, other than it is time for our unpaid advertisement, our resource sharing. And I think, Daria, you have that today.
I do. So I'm really excited about this one. I feel like I say this probably every time, but this really is a tremendous tool. I know we have talked about Determined project before from Virginia Department of Education, and this time I want to bring one specific tool up front and talk about that. So the tool itself is called a Good Day Plan, and I love it as a graphic organizer, as kind of a visual support to help engage in some of that explicit behavioral instruction with students. And this can be a great place to kind of start discussions about self-regulation. And so the Good Day Plan, you would do one-on-one with a student, and you would do it at a time that they are calm and things are going well. And it really has 4 components. So the first one says, what happens on a good day? What does a good day look like for you, right? And then the next one is it happening now? Which is a great conversation to kind of figure out why or why not, right? What all is going on. Then the third column takes us through the action planning of what needs to happen in order to make it a good day. And that's that piece where we can really embed a lot of self-regulation strategies as to, okay, so what can we do to make this a good day? And then the last column potentially is my favorite one that says, so who can help me with that? Right. And this is where there's that golden opportunity for the co-regulation and identifying folks who with some of those skills to make sure that every day is a good day. So I love this tool because it's structured in a very nice, clean way, and it helps move the conversation in a very supportive way for a student or an adult if you choose to use it with adults.
Daria, I always appreciate how excited you are about all the resources that we share. So with that, hopefully our readers are also, or our readers, hopefully our listeners are also excited about the resources. As always, they are linked in the show notes. And I think that brings us to the end of our episode. So Daniel, Daria, thank you so much for being with me today.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. Always excited to be here. And just a quick note to our listeners that if they would like to have additional resources or if there are topics that they would like to hear us talk about, we would absolutely love to know them.
Absolutely. And as always, if you have questions or thoughts or ideas, feel free to share that with us. Our email is cebis@odu.edu. That's CEBIS@odu.edu. With that, Emily, thank you so much for your help.
Thank you.
And we will see you all on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cebis@odu.edu, visiting www.cebisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky @CebisVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.